Catfish Dave here. This is a fish story, maybe sort of a flathead lesson. You'll see in a lot of my videos, I basically call the fish before I ever catch it. There's blue cats, channel cats, flatheads, stripers. They all seem to have their own characteristics about how they act when they hit a bait. Now this can vary from fish to fish. I've had blues that acted like stripers. I've had stripers that acted like blues. I've had flatheads that ran like a striper. But 90% of the time they have these distinct characteristics, and you can literally tell the bite and know what you're getting before you ever even set the hook on them. We'll start out with one story of a flathead. Springtime, I had two rods out, pretty high current. The baits were probably 40 yards apart. One was way downriver where the current had took it. The other one had kind of hung out in the main channel farther out. I ended up hooking a fish, which I thought was a flathead by the fight. He ended up kind of hanging me in some rocks, cutting me off. Well, I go up to the truck to retie another leader. It ain't 5 minutes later, I hear my other rod going off, sounding like flathead bite. I catch that fish. It is a good flathead, about a 30-pounder. Well, I haul it up to my truck tailgate, and I was going to take the hook out of its mouth and actually get a picture of the fish. And I had it under some light, and I seen several feet of Andy Blue Monster line. And it was the same fish that had just cut me off a few minutes earlier. And somehow that fish had cut me off downriver, swam upriver, probably 40 yards difference from where the two baits were, and had found that other bait and hit it. When they are in feeding mode, they obviously have very good senses, and they are obviously very aggressive and just going to keep hunting until they get full, basically. I've witnessed this several times. Basically, most of the time a flathead's a very subtle bite. I mean a very subtle bite. And it can almost fool you into thinking it's a turtle sometimes. I've got a video out called The 15-Minute Flathead Bite, and that was actually a good size flathead. And that flathead literally played with me for about 15 minutes, just lipping the bait, spitting it out. Never would hold it long enough for me to get a hook set until finally I was paying real close attention and I seen that line tighten up, and that's when I nailed it. Y'all watch that video, it's a good video. Anyway, I'm up in Kingston, Tennessee, and I'm on a stretch of the river there, right there, 58 landing, just messing around, and I pretty much just catch blue cats right there, and especially in the winter time. I've never actually caught a flathead there, because that's usually the only time I fish it is in the winter. Well, I was out there that night, and I did catch a small blue to start the night off, but I'm sitting out there, and I hear this very familiar sound, a very subtle bite. Reminds me of a flathead. Uh-oh. I picked the rod up, and I can feel this fish just lipping the bait. He'd lip it and he'd spit it. He'd lip it and he'd spit it. And I could feel this going back and forth. And I'm already saying in my mind, this is a flathead. So I'm sitting there to time it when he's going to lip it and when he's going to spit it. And when I thought I had it right, I cranked down on the reel. But I didn't time it right. I pulled the bait away from the fish. Oh, shit. You can hear me say, man, I bet that was a flathead.
I think that was a flathead.
So, me knowing how flatheads are, remembering other instances, um, like that one highly aggressive fish that had found both baits, I'm thinking, you know what, that flathead is still out there. I'm going to hurry up and I'm going to throw back out. And I'm going to catch that fish because I know how they are. That flathead, he's wants some food, he's going to keep going until he finds it. So I'm going to put my bait right back in front of him. I make the first cast and it kind of started to backlash a little bit, so I didn't quite hit my mark. So I reeled back in real quick and threw back out.
That was a flathead.
After I threw back out, you can probably hear me say in the camera, I'm talking to myself, man, I know that was a flathead, I know that was a flathead.
That was a flathead.
Anyway, it wasn't probably 2 minutes after I threw that bait out, and I heard that same sound again. Sounded just like a flathead.
This is just like the bite I had before that I thought might have been a flathead. Doing the same way. I threw the bait out in the same spot, hoping he'd find it again. It ain't no big fish, but it is a flathead. I know them flathead bites. Well, it was the gizzard shad that caught this fish. Not a big fish, but it is a December flathead.
Anyway, people, it's kind of a flathead lesson, you know. You've been doing this as long as me. I can tell most of the time that's what it is. They have different bites, you know, whether they're hitting a live bait or a cut bait. Typically, when you're getting them on cut baits heavy, it's in the cooler water periods, winter, early spring, late fall. I knew that was a flathead. Wasn't my first rodeo. And I threw that bait back out and got that fish. Wasn't a big fish, but it could have been a big fish. Because they all have that same subtle bite, especially when it's a cut bait. They're notorious to sit there sometimes and just mouth it and play with it for a while. A live bait, a lot of times you'll hear that initial inhale and they'll swim off for a little bit. A lot of times in the colder water periods though, they'll sit there and just lip that bait. So, that ever happens to y'all, and you think it might just be a turtle or something, go ahead and throw out in the same spot. Because if you're in flathead waters, it's very possible that's what it could have been. So throw that bait back out. That fish is hungry. When they're feeding like that, they're highly aggressive, and you got a good shot at getting them. Just you know, wasn't a big fish, but it's an experience, and I've had this happen to me numerous times, this time on camera, and you know, it's just the nature of flatheads, man. A lot of guys that have never fished for flatheads, they're used to catching blues or used to catching channel catch, they'll actually miss flatheads because the bite is so subtle. They'll think it's just a little dink fish, they'll think it's a turtle, you know, and a lot of times guys won't even try to set the hook when this is going on. I missed many flatheads when I first started catfishing because I just didn't realize how subtle the bite is and how big a fish could be making that subtle bite. So anyway, I'm just sharing a little flathead experience. You know, any experience that I can pass along, there's always a lesson in something, so that's what I done. Shared my little flathead lesson with y'all. If you ain't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. Tell your buddies. I'm that crazy catfisherman, pulling them in off the bank, doing my thing.